This is Ronnie Simpson, and you're watching the Break It Down show.
We get to do dope stuff on this show. Ronnie Simpson is a world successful, famous sailor who had a recent attempt at doing a solo circumnavigation of the globe in a race. And then my buddy Bryan, I want to bring him on the big screen. Hey, Bryan, welcome back. Bryan and I go back 30 years. Bryan also had a adventure on the ocean this past year, trying to row from Boston to London. Everybody, normally people go the warmer, I'll even say safer route of going from the Canary Islands over to the Bahamas and just kind of letting the ocean, look, it's not easy, but Bryan's like, no, we're going to do it the hard way. And so each of these gentlemen took on this fantastic voyage in their own discipline. And I think it's cool because, one, look, these guys are intrepid. These guys know what the heck they're doing. They've done impossible things before. But sometimes when you take on impossible things happen, and you have to sort of reset. And so each of these guys had a bit of a calamity, and both of them had to be rescued and abandon their boats. And I think there's a lot to learn from these guys' experience, the courage to talk about it. But also, I know from knowing both these guys, they're not done with their adventures. So, hey, fellas, thanks for coming on the show. And I really, really appreciate you guys coming on. And I love the parallel between who you guys are. All three of us are veterans. We've all used some kind of method to heal ourselves. And so I think that's dope as hell.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah.
It's a pleasure as always.
Ronnie, when you were saying off mic, 80% of the way almost done in a solo sail. Have you done a circumnavigation solo before?
No, I've done quite a lot of ocean sailing and ocean crossing, both solo and crewed. But this was my first attempt at sailing around the world single-handed, and this was my first solo race around the world. Hopefully not my last. Unfortunately, didn't finish it. So definitely some kind of unfinished business that I hope to go back and try again at some point.
Right. Well, you were on last time, and we had Rand on the show, and he had done a circumnavigation in his Sparrow, and we talked a little bit about, like he'd gone. I'm going to go on memory here, but he'd gone over a wave, and the boat had twisted, and that twisting had allowed cracks. The boat was fine, except for mold was now pervasive, and he had to always fight mold. And then his water pump broke, and there were just all these problems. And one of the things I love to ask him, and there's another guy named Randall Reeves, who he did I don't know if you know about Randall's thing. This is for any audience. This is what Randall did. Randall left San Francisco, went down the America's coasts on the West Coast, around Antarctica, and then up the East Coast of the Americas, over the top of Canada, back to San Francisco. This is ridiculous. Like, people don't do this by themselves. Now, if you ask these guys, which I did, like, how many times did you almost die? And they both giggle, like so many times, because there's times where, like Rand was saying, it was Randall was saying, yeah, there's times when I have to break all the safety rules to save myself. So I can't always tie off and go up front because I'm too exhausted. There's not enough time. And so I have to just hand over hand go up and fix the thing I have to fix, because the danger is that at that level. And I think that speaks to what it means when you do something by yourself. So I'll ask you the same question. How many times was your life in real peril, and what's your confidence level in those situations? Can you describe for us what that kind of thing is like?
Yeah, as far as how many times was my life in real peril, I mean, to be totally honest, I would just say one, and that was when I got rescued, or the events that led up to my rescue. I think that a lot of people have maybe a different perception of what is danger, and they have a different, I think, relation and tolerance with risk. I'm definitely not risk averse, but everything is something that you gentlemen are both familiar with, is from being in the military, is operational risk management. So everything I do in life, whether it's, entering into a business endeavor, or whether it's driving to the store to get groceries, or whether it's going out to go sailing or surfing, I'm always assessing risk and kind of making calculations and then acting accordingly. And so as far as racing around the world, I always knew that I was kind of on the edge. And like I said, I think I probably have a different relationship and tolerance of risk than most people do. The only time I ever truly felt in danger of actually potentially dying was the day leading up to when I got rescued after I broke my rig in the South Atlantic. But then again, like I said, I have probably a different relationship with that than most people. One of my favorite sayings in sailing is that one man's storm is another man's sailing breeze. So what might be a near-death experience to someone else is just something where I'm like, all right, this is pretty full on. I need to be on my A game and not make any mistakes right now. But whenever things got really hairy, I was always just trying to kind of think 2 or 3 steps ahead and take necessary precautions. And yeah, but having said that, it's certainly a very challenging environment going around the Southern Ocean in particular, and all 3 of the Capes. It's a very, very challenging endeavor. And I do know Randall actually fairly well. He's a really, really good guy, amazing adventurer. And if I'm not mistaken, I think he's actually out on an adventure right now. I think he just left again recently. Yeah, what he did is phenomenal, and certainly something to inspire others and something to aspire to. So
when I tell people who sail that he did that, they're like, no, he didn't sail around the Arctic Ocean or Antarctic Ocean. He's like, there's no way he did that. And I'm like, no, he did. He did. It is amazing. And he said he's trying to talk his wife into maybe doing something. So it's good to see that he did. Bryan, let's talk a little bit about your adventure and what you guys were doing, and then talk about the cascading things. Because, Ronnie was just talking about the risk and how he managed it. I know you and I talked about risk before you guys left and how you were going to manage it. Let's talk about what happened and what you dealt with.
This is the first time I'm meeting Ronnie, but I'm going to guess that every single system he has is backup system, and some of those backup systems probably have a backup system too. And when I did the row across the Atlantic, or when we went to do it the second time, like we had a redundant system from the redundant system, and we just had like a cascade of failures. I point to the space shuttle. I'm like, even NASA has issues like this. But yeah, like as soon as we left the gate, transponder went down. One day into it, our seats started to fail. Seats are important because you have to slide them back and forth. Day 3, the water maker stopped working. We just got salt water out of it. And day 4, the electrical system went down. And it was like, at some point you would say, okay, that's enough systems. We got to pull the plug. But yeah, so we kept going to plan B, and then at some point we're just like, that's it. Yeah.
When you were saying the seat was failing, and let's go into a little more detail because I want folks to understand what it means to row on an ocean, and then how many times the seat is moving so that you guys can get across the ocean.
A million times back and forth. So think of like a cruise seat. You have your oars, and the seat slides back and forth so you can use your legs. It was just so this is actually a funny story, Pete, and I only found this out 2 days ago. I haven't actually published this or anything. Well, I put it out an email. But so the seat was set up that like we had like a seat like this, right? We'd sit on it.
Yeah.
And the problem is when you sit on it, it was like a thick piece of plastic. It would bend like this and cause the wheels to bow out. And when the wheels bowed out, the kind of the force on the kind of the rim of the wheel changed. And the wheels were older, and so they cracked and exploded. And when the seats were designed, the guy that designed it put a little like an aluminum bar that went underneath it like this, so the seat wouldn't bow like that. And the problem was when we were kind of in a rush when we left. The problem was when we left, there was 2 little screw holes like this. Sorry, there is 2 little screw holes that were empty, and I didn't notice that because we put a seat cover over it. And we got back. And we pulled the seats off, and he's like, hey, the screws must have fallen out. And I was like, Gary, how did the screws fall out up? Screws fall out down.
Yeah.
And it had a seat cover on it. I mean, maybe the bolt fell off, but the screw would still be there. And he said, well, let me see the other seat. And we looked at the other seat. Sure enough, the 2 screws were missing as well. So it was one of those things where, like, we had a good plan in place, but, like, I didn't think to check for those things because we had the seat cover on top of the seat sagged in the middle, even though he had thought about that in advance to keep it from sagging. So that's just shit. That's what happens,
To be fair to you, you checked out everything on that boat too. Like you were thorough with this.
I hired a third-party consultant to fly in to do a whole assessment of the boat. We tested everything, every single system before we left, and did an overnight trip and tested every system before we left, and still failed. So, yeah, that's life. So,
Yeah. It's so crazy. Ronnie, when your mast fails, did you know that was the end of your race, or did you think, how do I fix this thing? Like at some point you're like, this is the end. What was that thought process?
I mean, I would say that like very, very shortly after the rig failed, I think I knew that my race was over. I think the biggest revelation at that point was whether or not I would be able to make it back to port with the boat intact. So the race certainly became secondary to trying to preserve the vessel and then trying to ultimately preserve my life. The thing that was really the worst when my rig came down was just the timing of it. You know, it was like the single biggest weather system that anyone in the entire race would encounter was about 26 to 30 hours behind me when the rig came down. And so with a rig up, it would have been no problem. I would have been going downwind in 65 or 70 knots. Still would have been very challenging, but again, it was the fact that it was like the biggest weather system in the race. So there were the boats that were in 4th, 5th, and 6th place. They all had to deal with that weather system, but of course they had intact boats with their masts still standing, and they still took very evasive maneuvers and had a lot on their hands. But with no rig up, that was, you know, the race became very secondary very quick. And then furthermore, the boat itself became very secondary very quickly once I was able to really kind of assess the situation and try to act accordingly. Definitely, like, preservation of life became the most important thing pretty quickly.
Yeah. What's that time frame? Like you saying pretty quickly, how long is that from mast goes down to I got to make a call?
Handful hours. It
Right.
was like I was very, very well aware that I had, again, like the single biggest weather system that any of the competitors would face was expected to meet me and then also meet 3 other competitors that were behind me in 4th, 5th, and 6th place. So the 4 of us were already very well aware that a really, really massive and precarious weather system was kind of coming out of the south and was going to meet us. So I was already well aware of that. And then, like I said, once the rig came down, first and foremost, I was just trying to stabilize the situation, which the rig was grinding into the starboard side of the boat, and it was definitely threatening to put a hole in the boat on the starboard side at the waterline, which would have been very, very bad for obvious reasons. So the immediate challenge was to stabilize the situation, but furthermore, within a matter of minutes, I knew that there was a good chance I was going to have to cut the rig away and pull the plug. And yeah, but it all played out in a few hours, and it became very apparent very quickly that I had to cut the rig away and then ultimately call for rescue. So from the time that the mast came down, I think I basically like assessed the situation in the first handful of minutes, and then I began to implement a plan, which was to cut the mast away, unfortunately. And then once I cut the mast away, it was, again, in a matter of minutes, it was pretty apparent that I was going to ultimately have to ditch the boat. And I would estimate within 2 hours of the rig coming down, I had the rig cut away and I was requesting rescue. It just happened.
And then
That's what was difficult was after I was something like 106 days into a race that should have taken me about 130 days total. And I was right on track for that. But it all just ended so quickly. It just ended, like I said, literally in a matter of minutes. It was like, all right, well, it's done. This is over. I've got to move on now. So.
And what's the rescue timeline look like? So you call for rescue. Obviously, you get rescued. Talk to us about that.
Yeah, that was actually one of like the biggest learning curves, and I think, or one of the biggest learning lessons, and what really one of the biggest surprises of the entire thing was actually how difficult it was to get rescued, because I was literally able to broadcast this whole experience on social media in real time because of Starlink. and I was able to talk to the American and the Argentinian authorities in real time, again, because of Starlink. But yet I was unable to reach any of the nearby commercial vessels for something like 11 hours. So it was crazy that like I could FaceTime my girlfriend, I could talk to 40,000 people on my Instagram, following, and I could talk to emergency authorities, but yet we could not make any contact whatsoever with a handful of commercial vessels that were very close to my position, and they were all motoring away from me. And it took us 11 hours watching these boats on AIS, watching them motor away from my position, completely unable to contact them. And, through AIS and through other technologies that are available, we had access to what were supposedly their contact numbers, their satellite phone numbers. But ultimately, we had to get in contact with, through the American Coast Guard and other people that were helping me on my behalf, raising every flag that could be raised. We ultimately were able to get in contact with the shipping agents for the shipping company that owns that boat, and then track down their phone number and contact the captain over WhatsApp. So
Wow.
It was, in my assessment, it was an incredible failure of systems that are in place and should be in place of contacting that vessel. But we were ringing the published numbers. There were 3 satellite phone numbers that were published for that vessel. Myself, the American authorities, the Argentinian authorities, and other people working on my behalf were all ringing those numbers for 11 hours before we could make contacts. And it was certainly not the way it was, I think, supposed to work. And so it was a real surprise and a real learning lesson. And hopefully something where this can be improved in the future for other people that are in my position or in a similar situation. But again, having Starlink and having actual internet connectivity was such a it was such a lifeline in that scenario. So much better than just dealing with satellite phones, which I've never had the greatest luck with, or other technologies. But actually having connectivity with Starlink was super crucial in my rescue.
Yeah, that's wild. And I think about when you're deployed and you're in an MRAP or whatever, we've got Blue Forest Tracker, and you can merc chat. You can just chat with each other. You can touch the icon, be like, hey, and you don't talk to people you don't need to talk to. But in this case, you'd be like, hey, shipping vessel number 12, I need rescue. When they come alongside of you, I mean, obviously they know how to do this stuff, but we don't know what that looks like. Are they lowering a rope? Are they trying to get your boat in the back of their ship? How does all that work?
Yeah, no, once we got in touch, everything went off really smoothly. And we also had very good and conducive weather conditions before that. I broke my rig in a storm, and there was a storm coming behind me. But in between those two systems, there was a period of good weather. So it all went off really smoothly once we got in touch, and they were all super professional. And I can't, sing their praises highly enough for the crew that was on the ship and for the captain of the ship. But they basically, it was getting in touch with them that was the hard part. But once we did get in touch, they turned around and motored towards my position. I continued motoring towards the coast, which was towards their position. And we basically rendezvoused 45 minutes before dark. They basically put the boat kind of I guess it would be beam onto the swells, which kind of would break up the swell. And then I came up to them from downswell. And I approached their starboard side. My boat was still fully intact. I still had a working motor and working electronics and all that. I just didn't have a mast. So I approached on their starboard side, my port side. They lowered down effectively like a rope ladder that had little rungs, like little ladder rungs on a rope ladder. And that rope ladder was next to a steel ladder that was on the side of the ship that was at like a 45-degree diagonal angle. So they lowered down a rope ladder. I basically pulled up next to that rope ladder on the, amidships on the starboard side, I got up next to the rope ladder. I hopped on the rope ladder. I just made calculated steps to step up the rope ladder, which was hanging vertically. So I was going straight up the rope ladder, probably about 10 rungs, until I got to the steel ladder that was then at like a 45-degree angle.
Right.
And then I just, again, made very calculated and deliberate steps and walked up the diagonal steel ladder until I got to deck level. And then that was that. So that part all went pretty smoothly. But again, that was significantly aided by good weather conditions and still being in daylight. The weather was expected to turn dramatically as it got dark. So if we had waited any longer to make contact with them, I don't know that I'd still be here talking to you. Like if we had to do that thing at night, especially as the weather would begin turning dramatically, then it would have been really bad. And waiting until the following morning was absolutely not an option, because the following morning we had 70 knots of breeze and upwards of 9 meters of sea state. So you're talking 30-foot breaking seas with gusts of 60 plus approaching 70 knots. And yeah, it would not have been an option the following morning. And that night would have been a real challenge. So backing up to earlier in the show, when you asked me like how many times I felt my life was really in danger, and I just said one, it was that day, which was February 12th, of trying to get in touch with the freighter, and I was motoring towards them and they were motoring away from me. And I was like, if we don't get in, and I was doing the math, I'm like, at their speed and my speed, if they don't turn around right now, it's going to be too late. And they literally turned around right then. But it couldn't have happened any later. It took 11 hours to get in touch with them. If it had taken 12 hours, I don't know that I'd be here. It was that close.
That's crazy.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And have you had any luck in locating the boat to recover it?
No, there's no boat to locate. I was ordered to scuttle the vessel. So after I got off the boat, I had 3 through-hull fittings that were ready to be opened. And so I opened those through hulls as I was pulling alongside their starboard side. So no, the boat's gone. But even then, an old mid-90s open 50 with no rig, replacing the rig, the boom, the rigging, and the sails is substantially more than the value of the vessel, even in good shape. So again, the boat became, just like the race, the boat became really secondary really quickly when compared to preservation of life, which is very unfortunate to have. And I'm sure Bryan can relate. It was just so unfortunate to have so much wrapped up in one endeavor and have it go south so quickly and so dramatically.
I want to have Bryan come in and talk about his part of his adventure, and then I want to come back and talk to you guys about your own recovery, like mentally, of like, hey, oh my gosh, this thing happens. But Bryan, talk a little bit about your guys' recovery. Very similar stories, I think.
So in our situation, our electrical system went down, the panel, but when we built the rig, the Starlink actually connected directly to the battery. So while there was a kill switch and stuff like that, the panel and stuff that ran the AIS and the navigation stuff, when that shut off, all that stuff went down, but our Starlink was still going. And just like Ronnie said, Starlink is so much better than sat phone, or we had like a transponder you could text through, and like, you know, it's literally like A, B, you know, just to write about, you know. So yeah, Starlink, I literally just got on the phone. I called my, we have like I assume Ronnie probably has like a land-based like weather guy who like manages everything and like, you know, has connections everywhere. We had the same sort of thing. He was in London. He called the Coast Guard. Then I called the Coast Guard directly. And then I had like a conversation with the team. And I said, well, we have no electronics, we have no navigation, and we have no AIS. And for the people that are listening in, they don't know what AIS is. It essentially tells you what other boats are out there. And AIS will tell you if you're on a collision alert with somebody. And you can actually, you know, ping them like Ronnie tried to do with the numbers provided. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work. And you kind of steer away from them. So even if you guys can't talk to each other, you can still follow the navigation laws, and they turn port, you turn starboard, and you just kind of go in the different directions. So you can still avoid each other. But we didn't have any of that, so we had no idea what was in the water, and we were in a big shipping lane. So I don't want to put my crew at risk. But we just called the Coast Guard, and unlike Ronnie, we were fortunately off the coast of Cape Cod, maybe 100 miles. Even though we were in 10-foot swells, they rolled up in a helicopter in 45 minutes. Super great, lowered a basket, pulled us right out. But yeah, I don't think we were in nearly the danger he was in. Certainly not for that prolonged amount of time. We probably had 5 hours where we were sitting there trying to like manage our systems and trying to say like, okay, we can fix this. Can we not fix this? Where does this put us? And finally, we, I like Ronnie. I had this moment where I was like, okay, I'm leaving this boat behind, and like I assume Ronnie's boat was probably well over $100,000. My little rowboat was well over $100,000. And like, we stepped off that thing, and I was like, well, that's the last time I'm going to see that thing. And just as luck would have it, a fisherman found it, and I bribed him, and he towed it back home. Yeah.
But that took weeks too, right? It took
it took honestly, that was 1 week ago, a week and a half ago. So it's been gone since June 5th. So what are we at now? September 3rd, 4th.
Yeah,
September 4th. So yeah, 2 months. It was nothing. I mean, we got it. It was all full of fish, covered in weeds.
So, and didn't you write that the Coast Guard was tracking you guys, and so they're like, "Hey!" all excited to see you.
Yeah. So, kind of a little bit of a funny story. I'm sure Ronnie probably has one of these EPIRB somewhere in his boat, and an EPIRB is like a little transponder, and if it gets wet, like really wet, he'll like shoot an antenna out of the top of it and say, okay, my boat's in trouble, come get me. And it will send out a transponder link for anybody in the area. I don't know what kind of radius. We'll say 20 miles, 50 miles, whatever. But you can actually see it via satellite as well. So like the Coast Guard in America can see it. So after we abandoned boat, about a month later, the EPIRB went off because there was a big storm off the coast of the Cape. And I remember talking to the Coast Guard, and he's like, yeah, the boat probably rolled over. The EPIRB's probably floated away. And so we didn't try to rescue it based on where the EPIRB was. And then eventually, after about 3 or 4 days, it shut off. Battery died. And when I recovered the boat hadn't rolled over. It was a big wave that went over the top of the boat, and the EPIRB fell into the bow. So I couldn't recover it the whole time. But yeah.
When you're making that call, you're the captain. These people's lives are, at stake, and your boat that you financed and told people, I am going to row across the nation or across the ocean,
Yep.
right? Like you're battling a lot of commitments. How hard was it for you to make the call?
So the money part is not even a factor. And I'm going to bet that Ron is going to say the same thing. There was never once I was like, oh, I'm not going to throw away $100,000. I'll stay tied to the boat first. The toughest part for me was when I got back, I had thousands of people support me financially, letters, emails, all kinds of stuff. And we were only out there 5 days, not even 5 days, when all these failures happened. And, listening to Ronnie, where he was so close to the end, I don't know if it'll be exactly the same for him, but for me, I felt like I let everybody down. And that was the tough. I didn't leave my apartment for probably a week. That was really the toughest thing. And that's the thing that's sort of eating away at me now. It's like, I want to do this again, to let people know that I can do this. I wasn't just like, this wasn't just some sort of fanciful thing for me. Like, I spent almost 2 years preparing for this. Yeah. So.
Yeah. How does that resonate with you, Ronnie, hearing Bryan's story?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it's a very different voyage, different journey, different circumstances, but there's a lot of strong parallels there. And definitely it's just, I can relate to not wanting to leave the apartment for a week, and you just want to crawl under a rock and die, and not, you feel like you let everyone down, and it's a horrible feeling of failure. I mean, it's no matter how you look at it, people would tell me like, "Oh, don't be so hard on yourself. You didn't fail." And I'm like, dude, I set off to race around the world and I didn't make it and I lost the boat. Like, no matter how you cut it, it's a failure, regardless of the circumstances that led up to that. It's a failure. So even whether it's ultimately like your fault or even in your control or what have you, it's a failure. And failure is really tough. Putting so much into something, whether it's financially, time-wise, effort, but also you put so much of yourself into that, and you put your name and your reputation at stake as well. You make this commitment, you say you're going to do this thing, and then you make every effort to go do it, and then it goes bad. And in my circumstance, it's like I had an old boat. It was a challenging boat, but I was still in third place out of 16 boats. I was on my way to a third place finish. The finish line was in sight, rhetorically speaking. And I felt like I did everything right. And then it all ended so poorly, so quickly. And that was just a really tough pill to swallow, that like, I look back at it and like, I really don't know what I could have done differently. I don't really know, given the scenario that I had and the level of funding that I had and the boat that I had and the resources that I had. I really don't know what I could have done differently, to be totally honest. And yeah, it's just a really tough pill to swallow. But such is life. I mean, so many people have, there's so many stories of people like bouncing back from challenging scenarios and being very resilient and coming back and succeeding, and if at first you don't succeed, then, try again. So, that's kind of where I'm at, is just figuring out what is the best option moving forward. But at the same time, thinking about what's really important in the big picture and adjusting accordingly.
Getting under a rock, staying in your place for a week, that recovery time, it's a reputational bruise. You have confidence. You guys are both so hyper talented at what you do. How long did it take for you to go, all right, and be able to look? You're talking about this thing on my show, and heck, I appreciate it, because why the heck do you want to talk about this thing again and again and again? How long did it take for you, Ronnie, to get past it, to where you can be like, yeah, this thing happened. I've checked myself. What else could I have done? Right. And sometimes the ocean wins. Like, it's just a big, mean ocean. Right. So how long did that take?
I'll let you know when I get there.
Fair enough. Bryan, what about you?
I'm still not over it. It's the hardest thing. It's the hardest thing I've ever had to endure. And I'm still not over it. So I'm still, it's still a battle day to day, and I'll let you know when I get there.
But you've been back out on the water though.
Yeah.
Any kind of, is it back in the saddle, or was it like that was never going to be a problem?
No, I was back in the saddle because I'm a professional sailor and I have bills to pay. So, I mean,
right.
I just crossed an ocean 3 weeks ago, 17 and a half days on a boat that was under my command, and sailed it from Hawaii to Washington State. And, 2 weeks after I got home, I hopped on a racing yacht in Mexico and took it back up to California. And it's, but again, that's because, I had bills to pay. So it's, and it's what I do. I'm a sailor. And, but as far as taking on another endeavor like this, I do want to do it, but I'm definitely not, I don't think you ever necessarily get over it. I think you're always going to be a little bit different. And, there's positives with that, undoubtedly as well. Maybe you'll make different decisions in the future, and you'll learn from failures of the past and hopefully come back stronger. But it's a really, really, truly difficult and sobering and humbling thing to come back from, for sure.
It's harder than combat?
I mean, it's so different, but probably, yeah. This was the worst. This failure was the worst thing in my life. So
yeah. How does the industry perceive you, though? I mean, it seems like they've signed off and said, hey, this stuff happens. Is that fair?
I mean, this stuff happens a lot. It happens to people in brand new boats with basically unlimited budgets.
Right.
But I think that my standing in the industry and how much support I'm going to receive going forward probably would have been a lot different if I would have finished the race in third place versus lost the boat and not finished. So
Right.
it's definitely, again, largely through no fault of my own. It's definitely not a positive thing for my standing in a variety of ways. So
Yeah.
it's a real tough thing to bounce back from.
Yeah,
Bryan, also, Bryan and I have known each other. Yeah.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Bryan.
I just want to add on to Ronnie's point because that was 100% true. So last year, when we were preparing for the race, I was going to row to England, and I spoke to this huge charity that does veteran stuff, and they were like, "We're going to raise $1 million off you, and if you do another race." And I was working for a small charity to begin with, and I said, "Well, I'm going to do this small charity, go to London, but I'll tell you what, after I go to London, maybe I'll row it back to I'll row the boat to Bermuda, and then we'll take the Bermuda up to Boston. We'll do like a triangle." And they're like, "Oh my God, that's great!" And they're like, "We'll give you $200,000 because I think we can raise $1 million." And after we failed, I reached out to them even before we got the boat, and I said, "Look, I can get another boat, and we can still do the road to London." And they were like, "Oh, I don't know." And it's been 2 months now, and they were, I was like a poster boy for them before I left, and now after they looked at me like, "Why? Maybe this guy was just really shooting for pie in the sky. I don't think he could do it. I don't know." But I'm not nearly as accomplished as Ronnie is, but I definitely had the same sort of situation where people were super high on me before I left, and when I went to do it second, now I want to do it again. People were sort of kind of tepid about the whole situation. But yeah, things happen. I mean, I keep telling people that's rowing an ocean. Like, you have little to no control. You can prepare as much as you can and then hope for the best. But even the best people fail. Yeah.
Yeah. Are you over it yet?
No, absolutely not. My girlfriend's like, "Why do you want to do this again?" I was so terrified. I was like, "You're missing the point entirely." I said, I don't leave this kind of stuff undone. It's like I built a half a fence, and like that's enough to keep the neighbors out. Like this. Yeah. So honestly, and this is my advice to Ronnie, though he's probably feeling the same thing I am. Like, the redemption can be bigger than the original row or original sale. If you go back and come back and do it again, I think people will look at it like, wow, like that's even more impressive. I think standing up after you get knocked down, and I'm kind of hitching my wagon to that a little bit. Because I do feel like Ronnie. I do feel like I let everybody down, and I just wanted to hide, and I still kind of want to hide. And I kind of want to run away from it. But now I'm sort of like, Pete's the first show I've done, and where I've like said, like I've told people I want to do it, but Pete's the first show I've come on live and said, this is what's going on with me. So yeah.
I've been doing a lot of the question asking. I want to let you guys have a chance to ask each other questions too, if you guys are interested in doing that at all.
Yeah, Ronnie, I want to ask you, how'd your mast break? Just older or just stress?
I mean, it was an older rig. It was an old rig from the early 2000s, so it was approximately 22, 23 years old.
Pretty old.
It was newer than the boat. The boat was from the mid 90s, but it was taken off 3 times. We took the rig down 3 times. It was inspected by myself as well as third-party professionals. We had all new rigging installed by professionals. We didn't really cut any expenses. We didn't kind of cheap out or cut any corners anywhere. We attempted to do everything right. Again, in a perfect world, I would have been fully funded and just put a new rig in the boat, a year before the race. And I think more and more, that's kind of the right thing to do, is just to put a new rig in the boat before you attempt to go do a race like this, especially on a racing yacht. But again, that was not within my means and not within my budget. So we constantly just did the best with the resources that we had available and the timeline that we had available. But to answer your question of how the rig broke, without being able to recover the rig and really do any forensics on it, we'll never really know what failed. There was no smoking gun to be found, so to speak. Having said that, I do not believe that any of the rigging failed. I did have some, pretty bright flashlights and stuff on board. And when the rig came down, I did look all around as much as I could, and I did not see any evidence of any actual rigging failing. I personally believe that the mast itself, it was just a tube failure from compression. It did happen. Like I was down below. Whenever I say we, I mean me and the boat.
Yeah.
We launched off a wave, and we were going upwind on a port tack, and the boat launched off of a wave. And basically, like it was a particularly large wave because I was down in my bunk, like very nervously looking at instruments and numbers the entire time, and kind of just along for the ride and constantly making adjustments that entire night. And of course, it happened in the middle of the night because, of course. And so we launched off of a big wave, and it was right when we landed that the rig buckled and came down. So I personally, again, think that the carbon fiber mast tube itself actually just compressed and failed and buckled. But again, I'll never really be able to confirm that. I'll never really know that. But again, just to touch on another point that you said, I do think that the redemption, like while I am not over the moon and I'm still upset and dealing with what happened, I'm also optimistic towards the future. And as you said, the redemption can be bigger than the initial effort itself. And I think that the world is always looking for a good story. And I think that if you package it right, there's definitely like an underdog story, a comeback story, a story of resilience and redemption. I think that these are all things that can successfully be leveraged. And I do think there's a story there probably for both of us to make another attempt at it. It's just, connecting the dots and trying to pull that together. But like yourself, I'm sure you can, or like myself, I'm sure you can relate it. It does take a lot to get back on the horse after an endeavor like that. Like, do you really want to go through that again? And it's a big personal decision, but in my case, it's not really up to me. It's up to people that will invest the amount of money that we need to go do something like this. So it's really not up to me. If it were up to me, I would write the check and go do it again, but it's really not up to me. So
it just so happens the adventurer isn't usually rich.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's funny. Do you have any questions for Bryan at all, Ronnie?
Yeah, sort of just honestly, like, what have you done? Because I know kind of what I have done of being in this period where I felt a bit lost, and I am undertaking some new endeavors in my own life to kind of move on from this experience and find a new path forward. But like, what have you been doing? Not necessarily rowing related, but what have you been doing to kind of get past this and continue on and find this new path forward?
So this is going to sound kind of goofy, but there's a really good answer for this. I like to write, and I put out like a newsletter, like a blog, I guess, or something like that. I send it out via email to a couple thousand people, and it's not like a. So I own a little business, a little rowing studio, but the emails are never they're never really about the rowing studio. They're much more like my process. I just sent an email last week called AAR, After Action Review, and I kind of laid down like how all the failures happened and like how was I culpable in every single one of them. In some cases, my culpability might just be in ignorance, and that's still culpability. But I really try to be kind of honest with the people who are following me, like almost to a fault. To be like, this is what I did, this is why I did it, and this is what I was trying to do, and kind of take ownership of it. The easy thing to do would be to run away from this. Just like pretend it never happened. I think that the more challenging thing and probably the better thing is to run towards it and, just accept it, and be like, this happened. There's nothing I can do. Just optimistically tell people I'm going to try again. And, I'd really like it if you stuck by me again. So, yeah, I guess a long-winded answer is just, to tell people how you feel. And that's kind of what I've been doing.
Yeah.
So, well, I'm proud of the both of you guys for coming on the show and talking about this stuff so openly. It's one thing to make a big, bold thing happen and say, I'm going to race around the world, or I'm going to row the hard way around the ocean. It's just ridiculous how big and bold you guys think and how well prepared you guys were. And then to have calamity hit and still come on and be willing to talk about it. It says a lot about your guys' character. And I, for one, I think the world to both you guys and just, want to see your guys' continued success. Is there anything you guys want to plug while we're here so folks can be like, hey, I love these guys. What can I do to support Ronnie or Bryan? I guess I'll let you go first, Bryan. What do you want to talk about? What can you plug so folks can support you?
Quite frankly, I was raising money for veterans in general, primarily with PTSD. Any kind of sports for veterans, I find is really just amazing to help people get back on their feet and get back integrated in society. I would just recommend, there's an assortment of veteran things. I'm trying to row for Home Base, which primarily does PTSD like symptoms, but also traumatic brain injuries and spinal injuries. So I give Home Base a plug. And if you want to check them out, they're located here in Boston. They're affiliated with the Red Sox. It was started by the Red Sox owner. Help me out, Pete.
I'm typing up home base first.
Warner, the owner for the Red Sox, Tom Warner. He visited the one of the hospitals in DC for veterans, and he was so moved by it, he started this whole Home Base charity, and which is why they call it Home Base, because it's related to the Red Sox. But yeah, so if you wanted to support me, you could support them. I'm trying to. People reached out to me last time and really donated a lot of money to me towards my row across the Atlantic. As Ronnie will tell you, doing something like this is ultra expensive. Nobody's getting rich doing this. Yeah, if you want to donate to that organization, that'd be great. I'm going to try to fund my own row across again, just by myself. So we'll see.
And then, because Bryan won't promote himself, I'm going to promote it. If you ever want to row and get in shape and do something for charity, the same kind of thing, get involved, you can go to Rowers Without Borders. Just go to Facebook, and I'll put the link out here.
Oh yeah, Rowers Without Borders. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, Rowers Without Borders. Bryan puts on these things, these challenges, like, hey, we're gonna do a rowing to the moon, and then do a 250,000-mile row, whatever it's going to be. He'll come up with a great story. It's a lot of fun. It's not that expensive and a fantastic way to get into shape. So definitely support Bryan that way, or go to Home Base and do that. Ronnie, same thing for you. What do you want to promote?
I just, honestly, I just want to say thank you to everyone who helped me out. I think Bryan's going to be able to relate. Obviously, whenever you do an endeavor like this, unless you are independently wealthy and you can just fully fund it, it requires the support and the generosity and the belief from a lot of people that you can go do this. And so when you don't finish it, it's very challenging and puts both of us in a hard spot. But, I'm just grateful. And I just want to plug everyone that sponsored me and helped me out, as well as a bunch of private donations and private support. My title sponsor was Shipyard Brewing, which I was wearing my Shipyard shirt because we're on a podcast. But Shipyard Brewing, which is a Portland, Maine-based brewing company, Fred Forsley, the owner, and really the whole staff, they've become personal friends, and they've really stuck with me, and they want to see me go do it again. They can't really write the check for me to go, just do it again, but I'm so grateful for their support, and it's truly just a great company. I love what they stand for, and just connecting people, and Portland, Maine business, and just a really fantastic company. And so, I mean, just huge thanks to Shipyard Brewing, but also like US Patriot Sailing. Again, like all you guys, the veteran cause is something that's very near and dear to my heart. And I think healing through competitive sailing, but also through building community and camaraderie, and just getting out on the water and getting out in nature, and just I think the inspirational benefit of going sailing and having a goal and something to reach for is something that I think all of us can relate to. And US Patriot Sailing, which is based in the Chesapeake, but they've also got chapters in California. They've got a lot of stuff in San Diego and Los Angeles, as well as the Chesapeake and all over the Maryland area. But yeah, US Patriot Sailing, fantastic organization, all volunteer organization. Really, truly believe in that cause, but also all the companies in the marine industry that supported me, like West Marine supported me, and New England Ropes supported me, and Ronstand supported me, and Facnor and Wishard, and all these other companies that supported me. And of course, I'm leaving a lot out. I would have to go name 30 companies, but and I don't want to take up all your time, but just so many companies that did support me. And one thing that was so, I think, inspiring and heartwarming throughout this entire campaign was the amount of people that I, approached in the marine industry or not in the marine industry, but I said, hey, this is what I'm doing, and I'd really love it if you would support me. And an overwhelmingly large percentage of people are just really good, and they would use that position they have as the marketing director for blank. They'd be like, yeah, man, that's a cool cause. I'm going to help you any way I can. And sometimes they can write you a check. Sometimes they can give you some free stuff. Sometimes they can just help you out and give you a discount, whatever it is. But it's really the thought that counts. And yeah, I'm just so grateful to everyone that believed in me and believed in this project and helped me out. And like, even though the race didn't end the way I wanted it to, and even though I wasn't able to achieve the result that I had hoped to achieve, I still hope to achieve a good ROI and some kind of return for everyone that did support this. And so just every company from Shipyard Brewing and US Patriot Sailing down to every single marine industry company and vendor that helped me out, I'm just so grateful. And I just want to, I think, honor their support and really try to plug them and continue to be an advocate for their brand. And so, yeah.
And I've been putting these links up, you guys. If you are trying to find a way to find all of Ronnie's things, well, look, you just go to the source. Go to RonnieSimpsonRacing.com, because you can support Ronnie by going there and filtering into Starlink or the rope company, the brewing company. They're all listed there, and that's a great way to keep track of what he's doing, donate to what he's doing, and look, you get. These guys won't promote themselves because they're such great dudes. So I'm going to promote. Ronnie is great. You guys should follow him, support him. And Bryan is a lifelong friend of mine. He also is great. And so if you're anywhere near Boston and you want to row, get your ass down to his studio and row, or take on one of these rowing challenges. You guys are both so wonderful. I thank you guys so much. Is there anything you guys want to say before we wrap this thing up?
No, that's it. You got me. That sounds excellent. Thanks, Pete. I appreciate your show.
I can relate to what you're going through, Bryan. So just keep your head up, brother. It's there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and
let me ask a question, Ronnie. When you if you do go again, what's your projected date?
It would be October of 2027. We're going to try to put together a campaign for the Global Solo Challenge again, but in a very different way. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it underfunded and in a manner that is financially devastating. And I'm not going to do it where I'm panhandling on the internet for money. I've reached my personal limit for asking people for money. So if we can find a real corporate sponsor that can actually fund the endeavor and do it properly, I will. But I'm not going to go race around Cape Horn again, dangerously underfunded and panhandling for money on the internet. It's admirable to do it once, but I'm not going to do it twice. So we do want to do it again, but we'll just have to see how it works out.
Best of luck to you.
Yeah, best of luck to you too, man. Sorry for what happened, but keep your head up. It's a really admirable thing that you took on, and hopefully we can both bounce back and achieve success. So,
all right, very cool.
I'm going to roll these credits. I'll be right back to you guys.
Hey, thanks for watching the show. I really appreciate it. Right here, you can subscribe. Please do that. It makes the show grow. Hit that notification bell so you know which incredible guest is coming up next. Down below is the PayPal link. You can put a small subscription in. That is an enormous help. All that money goes right back into the show. And then right up over here are the next episodes you should listen to, curated by yours truly. Thank you.